right, everybody, we're coming up here, crunch time, trying to get through nationalism here. And so we're going to quickly talk about what nationalism is and talk about nationalism in Italy, so we can do yet another compare and contrast if possible. So nationalism, along with having pride in your country, nationalism is the idea that a nation, or technically a state, is made up by people who are linked together through these 5 common factors. Right? They speak a common language. They share the same culture. By that, they wear the same type of dress. They worship a version of the same religion for the most part. They eat the same type of foods like hamburgers, hot dogs, strudel and schnitzel, fragua, and etouffee, whatever it is. They also share the same type of customs, like holidays, similar rituals where the entire group participates in one entity, like Guy Fawkes Day in Great Britain. And here's where it gets interesting, is they have a shared and long history that goes back over a significant amount of time. So you can't be a Johnny-come-lately. You've got to have been around for a while. And they also share the same type of government. Historically, throughout Europe, this has been done through monarchies. And so this brings us to the Congress of Vienna, that period of time after the Napoleonic Wars. And the Congress of Vienna has a couple goals to it. This is that time where Clemens von Metternich invites all the royals of Europe to Vienna to talk about what to do next. Number 1, they want to create a lasting peace in Europe. The period of the French Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars, Europe has just been devastated. Number 2, they want to create a balance of power so that no one country's military can be so overwhelmingly superior as to dwarf everybody else, like what almost happened with Napoleon, not once, but twice. Thirdly, they wanted to protect monarchies while instilling legitimate hereditary monarchs. So where they had been removed, whether by Napoleon or the French Revolution, hereditary monarchs in Spain, in Portugal, and France are reinstituted. And last but not least, they want to create what is known as the Concert of Europe, a peacekeeping force, kind of like the League of Nations or the United Nations, that will handle problems. They were going to use their words. They're going to use dialogue. They're going to use negotiation. They're going to use compromise instead of going to war. The problem is, in the new modern era, old feudal dynastic states were trying to compete with these new industrial giants. So the Congress of Vienna will come into conflict with the Industrial Revolution. These feudal dynastic states only governed small regions in Europe. Great Britain had taken this huge head start, this giant leap ahead, because they had industrialized. France also was a large nation that was united, but they were behind in industrialization. But in other places of Europe, the Austrian Habsburg Empire, for instance, the different German states, the Italian states, these countries were broken up into tiny little regions. So the big question is, how do we consolidate them? How do we make them economically and administratively efficient when we've got like 14 Italian states and 360 German ones, and religious states, the papal states in Italy? What exactly do we do? Well, the easiest way to become one nation would be to support nationalism. But you have people like Clemens von Metternich that wants to keep the centuries-old system of monarchies. and these monarchies that rule the different regions of their territory. Great Britain and France knew that efficient government is necessary and required to run efficient industry. And the commerce that will develop through the Industrial Revolution is going to support this. It's going to support nationalism. However, if you're one of these old dynastic states like Austria, like Italy, and like Germany, you're going to be against it. And this brings us to the Crimean War. In 1856, this new United Nations Concert of Europe faces its first big test. The Crimean War breaks out when Mother Russia is still trying to get warm water port. We still have not get it, and we will try very hard in which to do so. The Crimean War breaks out when Russia tries to seize Ottoman territory along the Black Sea on the old Crimean Peninsula, where Peter the Great had tried years before. Now, this disturbs many Christian groups who were going on pilgrimage to the Holy Land in different Christian shrines. This would take them inside the territory of the Islamic-led Ottoman Empire. Well, Russia says they had to defend their Christian countrymen while they traveled through the Ottoman Empire. Well, the Ottoman Empire wasn't as formidable as it once was. It was beginning to decay, and other countries wanted to take parts of it. So Great Britain and France entered the Crimean War on the side of the Ottoman Empire for two reasons. Number one, to get some land from the Ottomans, and number two, to block Mother Russia. They did not want Russia into the Mediterranean Sea. Limit them where they are so the British and the French could have more land. So the Crimean War was Russia versus the Ottoman Empire and Great Britain and France. Russia is once again defeated. And this shatters the idea that Russia was invincible. There was the idea of the old Russian bear since it defeated Napoleon. Well, the Russian army didn't do it. It was the Russian cold that did. So, these three allied countries, the Ottoman Empire, France, and England, worked together for a speedy, quick end to this conflict. But what the big thing about the Crimean War, and maybe I'll tell you guys a story about the Charge of the Light Brigade if you remind me, is it demonstrates, it signals that this concert of Europe really doesn't work. This negotiation and dialogue instead of fighting, well, that went right out the door. And what it does is it kind of fans the flame of nationalism, allowing people to form more modern nation states. So there it is. And what's going to happen under this concert of Europe under here Metternich is that these freedoms that were talked about in the Enlightenment, like the freedom of the press and the freedom of speech, that doesn't happen. And if you're a monarch and you see a neighbor in trouble, then it is your duty to go and put that down. And so what we're going to talk about in class on Monday is the number one development of Europe between 1850 and say 1920 is the unification of Germany. We'll talk about that in class. But first, we're going to start with a smaller version of everything and go to nationalism in the country of Italy. Now, if you think about those 5 factors of nationalism, all right, nowhere does it make more sense if you look at those 5 factors of combining them than it does in Italy. The concept of nationalism had existed in Italy for quite a while. The problem is nobody really knew or could agree on how to do it. They all spoke Italian, predominantly Roman Catholic. They ate the same foods. Their history goes back to Julius Caesar. So they have all the things that they need. So the problem is, how do we get this all coordinated? Geographically, unifying the Italian states into one country should be a pretty easy thing to do. As I just said, they have the same language and traditions. the factors that link Italy should give them, or could, would have, should have, could have, give them the things that they need to modernize. But up to this point, everyone who tried it had failed. And that was because they are controlled by the powerful Austrian Habsburg Empire in the north and part of Spain in the south. But they're the two Giuseppes, Giuseppe Mazzini and Giuseppe Garibaldi. They want to end Austrian domination of the north. Now, these guys want a Republican democratic government. And they both advocated, they were willing to use force to go to war to drive out the Austrian Empire. But the Austrians were tough. The Austrians were powerful. Edelweiss, what's going on? You're not trying to get rid of us down here in Italy. So they just really didn't know how to go about it. And there's the older guy on top is Mazzini, and the younger guy resting his head on his hand is Garibaldi. We'll talk about him in a second. So how do we find a way, whoa, sorry about that, to drive these guys, to drive Austria out of Italy? That's going to be our big test as I mess with the camera here since I just ran right into it. Okay. 1852, the king of one of the small Italian states, known as Sardinia and the Piedmont, King Victor Emmanuel, I call him Okam Emmanuel, appoints to his assistant, his second in command, Prime Minister Count Camillo Cavour, or CCC. Now, Cavour is an old noble. He's of noble birth, so he's an aristocrat. But he's not a dumb guy. And he saw the benefits of modernization and industrialization and economic efficiency. As Prime Minister Cavour knew that the more power his king gets, then the more powerful he himself gets. And so Cavour was willing to do whatever it took to accomplish his goals. The end will justify the means for some of these nationalists. Cavour felt that if Italy was unified, if it could prove and demonstrate that their modern economy would be industrialized, that they could make money, then some of the big-time, prime-time European powers would help them out, would help them get rid of their competitor in Austria. But we gotta find an ally. And here is where Cavour is a master politician. The guy on top with the interesting stash is King Victor Emmanuel, and the thoughtful little guy with the nice glasses down there is Count Camillo Cavour. So, how do we do this? How do we get rid of Austria? Well, Cavour knew the way to get rid of Austrian domination was to get help from a prime timer, most likely France. France could help him, and so he decides to woo French Emperor Napoleon III. Now, during the wars with Napoleon, during the wars against Russia, Sardinia and the Piedmont contributed all they could. They didn't have a lot, all right? A few soldiers, some medical supplies, but it's not the gift, it's the gesture. They gave all they had. All right, we're tiny, we're small, but we're going to give what we can. And Cavour does this on purpose because he knew that if the French and the British won with the Ottomans against the Russians, because he contributed, he would get invited to the peace conference. And that is exactly what happens. And Cavour is just a master. During the conference, this little guy comes in, he starts shaking everybody's hand. How you doing, Count Camillo Cavour? Hey, how you doing, Count Camillo Cavour? Prego, grazie. Hey, would you like some, marinara? Would you like some Alfredo? How you doing? I'm Count Camillo Cavour. And he works the room. And he knew that Napoleon III always liked to make this dramatic entrance. So Napoleon III comes in and he expects to be the star of the show. And there's this little Italian guy running around working the room. And he's like, who is that guy? And so Napoleon III wants a meeting with Cavour, and Cavour's like, oh, I've been looking for you all night. Look, I listened to the Billy Joel song. Would you like to share some wine? I got a bottle of red. I got a bottle of white. Let's sit down tonight. And they start talking. They're having a few drinks. And in the middle of it, Napoleon III says, man, I really like you, cowboy. So I will agree to you. I will agree any assistance you ever need. If you need anything, all you have to do is ask. Especially if those Austrians give you a problem, you let me know and I'll help you take care of them. Now, the problem is Cavour has got help, but he can't be the aggressor. He's got to trick Austria into attacking him so he can scream, help, 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 and that way he and France are justified. We need to make it look like it's somebody else's fault, all right? Remember, it's not the person who starts it, it's the person who reacts, like on an athletic field, who gets caught. Well, Cavour is marching some of his soldiers near the Austrian border. When they get close, they instantly turn around and head back, but the Austrian army heard they were coming, and they rush out to meet them. And they attack Sardinia and the Piedmont in Sardinia and Piedmont territory. And Cavour's like, help, help, help. And the war starts. April of 1859, the war starts. It will be known as the first of summer wars. They last about 7 weeks and are fought between spring planting and fall harvesting. The Austrian Habsburg Empire will be attacked on 3 sides. Sardinia and the Piedmont will go to defend themselves. France will come in and help. But what Austria doesn't realize is they are attacked by a newcomer we'll talk about in class, known as Prussia. And Otto von Bismarck in Germany comes, and Austria-Hungary loses. This old world, large, powerful empire for the very first time ever loses. And they had to give up their territory in northern Italy. All of a sudden, the other Italian states see this. Man, Sardinia and the Piedmont beat Austria. This is great. Plus, they've got help from other people. So, encouraged by this victory, some of the other Italian states say, hey, we would like to join you. We would like to be part of your territory. And Cavour says, well, you can, as long as you acknowledge my king, Victor Emmanuel, as your king. And so Sardinia and the Piedmont will pick up other Italian states, as you see here on the map. Now that's great, and that's wonderful, but not all of Italy is united yet. So now we're going to find a way to do that. With this never before seen, almost as much as the American colonies upsetting Great Britain, Sardinia and the Piedmont have upset Austria-Hungary. And so Giuseppe Garibaldi and Giuseppe Mazzini force Emmanuel and Cavour to work for them to help plan for total unification of Italy. So Cavour will finance Garibaldi and his army known as the Red Shirts. There were 1,000 guys who wore red shirts. He goes, you guys go try to go down to the south where Spain is in control, and I will support you. So Cavour gives weapons and other naval support, and Garibaldi attacks the Kingdom of Sicily and forces it to join a unified Italy. And then he makes it to the mainland, and he's shooting up the coast, and he gets to the city of Naples, but he was moving with speed. He got so much help from the people of Italy in support, Cavour was freaking out. He's like, oh my God, I didn't think this guy would come anywhere close to this. And he wanted to prevent this democratic Republican government. He wanted to use Garibaldi, but not actually form a democratic government. But Garibaldi proves to be much, more spunkier and much better of a leader and a military man than expected. Sorry, got a little confused right there. So, Cavour has to call out trained military troops to go out to slow down Garibaldi's like peasant militia. And so Cavour turns on his ally with the regular army. Now, Mazzini and Garibaldi, Mazzini has died. Garibaldi realizes this. He knows he can't win. As Cavour goes south, he captures the papal states that belong to the Catholic Church. And when Garibaldi realizes he's taking on a trained real army, he knows that he can't win. He wants to save bloodshed. So he stands his army down and he accepts the rule of King Victor Emmanuel of Sardinia and the Piedmont in 1861. He said, unification is my goal, not a civil war. Yes, I would love a modern democratic republic, but, you know, unification is the ultimate goal, so let's go with that first. And so in 1861, right about the time as the United States starts our Civil War, King Emmanuel is proclaimed the king of a unified Italy. It was the first time that Italy had been unified under one leader since 476 AD when the Roman Empire fell. Unfortunately, there are problems for this newly unified Italy. They lacked many natural resources to get this industrial economy. Plus, it was the heyday of immigration as lots of Italians were leaving Italy and headed for the United States. And for thousands of years, local regions of Italy had looked after themselves. It was very difficult for them to think of themselves as part of a united nation instead of after their own local interests. So try as hard as they could, Italy was never able to achieve the economic and political levels of strength to contest the great European powers. However, a new nation, the modern country of Italy, is born, or some would say reborn, after the fall of the Roman Empire. So that is Italian unification. Democratic Republicans try to bring about a peaceful democratic republic, but it looks for right now as monarchies are still going to win. So this is what is happening in Italy as we speak, and what happens in Italy will be simultaneous with what happens in Germany, which we'll talk about in class. And Cavour is like a junior or a JV guy that we're going to talk about tomorrow. This interesting guy known as Otto von Bismarck. Well, here's the end of the last slide. Sorry about that one. Unified since 1861. But this guy here, Otto von Bismarck, is, I don't know if he's a Jedi or a Sith, but I kind of like him. All right, see you guys soon.